Good morning, everyone. I'm Errol Barnett in for Vladimir Duthier. At this moment, we're gathering all the big stories happening around the U.S. and around the world. First, President Trump says Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell's termination cannot, quote, come fast enough. U.S. markets just opened. They're reacting to this and Powell's warning about the president's tariffs. Also, why the battle between Harvard University and the Department of Homeland Security could make it more difficult for foreign students to study in the U.S. Also, we'll take you live to Puerto Rico following an island-wide blackout there. Our crew's on the ground with more than half the island without power at this moment. When will they all get the electricity they need? CBS News 24/7 starts right now. All right, so we begin this hour with a strongly worded response from President Trump on Fed Chair Jerome Powell's comments at a conference yesterday. Powell says the central bank could face a challenging scenario as it adjusts to the tariffs imposed by the White House. He also warned the Trump tariff conflict would likely include higher inflation and slower growth. President Trump snapped back on Truth Social this morning. You see it right here. He's calling Powell, quote, too late and wrong. He also says Powell's termination cannot come fast enough. As you see, that's a direct quote. And we have team coverage on this for you this morning. CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady is in Studio 57. You see her on the right of your screen. But let's begin with CBS News correspondent Natalie Brand at the White House. Natalie, good morning to you. The president originally nominated Jerome Powell for this post. So does he even really have the power to just unilaterally fire him?
And Chair Powell, Errol, has been asked about this himself and said no, that the president does not have the legal authority to terminate, to fire the president or to remove him except for cause. Although we know and we've seen President Trump, the Trump administration, trying to exert more power over independent agencies, the Fed being one of them. But note in an executive order that the president earlier signed trying to do just that, the Federal Reserve, specifically its monetary policy, was exempt from that executive order. Now, I tried to ask the White House for clarification about that tweet, what exactly the president meant by that. And one of the communications team said, well, we'll have to wait and see what the president says about it later today when he's likely going to be asked about it by reporters. Now, note that Chair Powell's term as chair expires in May of next year, 2026, but his term as member on the Board of Governors expires in 2028, Errol.
And meanwhile, Natalie, the state of California is now filing a lawsuit in regards to the president's sweeping tariff policy. This state would be one of the world's largest economies by itself. What's the justification for why California is doing this?
Yeah, California, the fifth largest economy in the world. Well, the governor there, Gavin Newsom, and according to this new suit, says that the president does not have the authority to unilaterally impose tariffs under that act, the International Economic Foreign Powers Act, which was used to impose this sweeping tariff policy. He's also noted that his state, with heavy investment in the tech sector, in agriculture, could stand to lose, he says, billions of dollars. Take a listen to what he had to say.
This is recklessness at another level. The impacts already on the lack of investment. Any business person, small or large, uncertainty is the number one enemy. Just give us certainty.
Now, the White House has continued to defend its tariff and trade policy, saying that it's a, quote, historic effort to address the national emergency of a persistent and large trade deficit. Errol.
And meanwhile, Natalie, we know that many nations are hustling to get a deal with the U.S. before this 90-day pause on tariffs ends. The president said he had a great conversation with the president of Mexico yesterday. He met with the Japanese delegation, and today he's set to meet with the Italian prime minister. Do we see anything tangible coming from these talks just yet?
Yeah, well, Errol, the White House has touted these negotiations as, progress in the process. These talks are happening with trading partners, but we have yet to see any firm trade deals or details of deals that are in the works. So that remains to be seen. Obviously, trade policy is highly complex and technical. And as we've been reporting, there's more than 70 countries that the White House has said are calling. So it has to hash out these negotiations with all of them. We're also waiting to hear for progress on if and when talks between the U.S. and China will occur, since there is an escalating trade war there. The president, in that social media post touting the calls that you referenced, said that even China wants to meet. But again, we do not have details of whether there's any progress on that front.
Yeah, and we'll keep looking at that closely. Natalie Brand with the latest at the White House. Thanks so much. Let's jump over now to CBS News Money Watch correspondent Kelly O'Grady joining us from Studio 57. Kelly, what is your read on the Fed chair's remarks from yesterday? Because he likely anticipated the president's fiery response, which came this morning.
Yeah, Fed Chair Powell is always very calculated in the messaging. He's traditionally very tempered in how he delivers his remarks. I mean, for months leading up to the president taking office, we would ask him, how are tariffs going to impact? And it was always a wait and see. What I take from this are kind of two main things. He is a very data-driven person. And yesterday we heard him say we are actually starting to see slowing economic growth show up in the data. And so it's no longer we're going to have to wait and see how consumer sentiment impacts that. He actually fully admitted that we are seeing a little bit of a slowdown, even though the economic fundamentals remain stable, I would say. The other thing is this high inflation and high unemployment possibility. You heard him say that these two things could be in tension, and the Fed's main goals are to keep inflation low and to keep the labor market strong. And so he didn't say stagflation, but when you put those two things together, that's what you get. And so you saw investors, the second he started speaking yesterday, the Dow started dropping because investors hearing Powell just so brazenly talking about that, I think, caused a lot of concern, Errol.
And we're looking at a chart of the Fed and its activity on interest rates over the past year plus. Just a few moments ago, the European Central Bank lowered its interest rates by 25 basis points. How might that impact the Fed? We know that its decisions are independent and it's focusing on the U.S. market, but how might that be connected?
Based on who I'm talking to, this likely isn't going to impact the Fed. The European Union was kind of in a different situation. They have more of a need to stimulate growth. And even, Christine Lagarde has been talking all morning at that meeting, and I've been following it. And they were highlighting sort of the trade outlook and all of that uncertainty being very, very, very much a driver of this cut. When you listen to the Fed, it's been more messaging of let's wait and see. Our fundamentals are solid. We don't need to make any rash decisions. So I think the European Union just economically was in a little bit of a different spot, and that's unlikely to have an impact on what Powell does next May.
Okay, and I did hear Christine Lagarde also mention the low unemployment rate that Europe is enjoying as well. Kelly O'Grady with the latest there. Thank you so much. Now to this, the Department of Justice is fighting back against the man you see right next to me. He's the federal judge who says there is probable cause to find the Trump administration in criminal contempt over the deportation of hundreds of migrants to a prison in El Salvador. Judge James Boasberg wrote the government's actions, quote, demonstrate a willful disregard, end quote, for his order to turn around the planes carrying deportees. Now, the White House has previously denied violating that order. CBS News Department of Justice correspondent Scott MacFarlane joins us now from our D.C. bureau on what really is a showdown between the judicial and executive branch. Scott, good morning to you. What is the judge pointing to that suggests that this administration willfully disobeyed his order?
Yeah, it's a great question. He's pointing to many different things because he took 46 pages to spell out his case for why, in a very provocative announcement, he says the Department of Justice and the Trump administration engaged in contempt of court, a potential criminal action. Among the things he argues, Errol, is that he gave a pretty clear instruction, if not order, verbally on March 15th, then in writing that those planes should turn around if necessary that night so he could have a closer look at some of these cases, some of these deportees who were shipped out of the country without due process. Then he continues to say that he has specified in open court a series of instructions and questions to the administration to which he seems not to have satisfactory answers. And he knocks down arguments from the administration that a verbal order is different than a written order or that there was a lack of clarity in what he was saying. He is saying in his 46-page opinion, his instructions, his order were crystal clear. He's giving them time to respond to this, but I would expect a whole mountain of paper to pile up over the next few days in response to this criminal contempt finding.
And Scott, the judge has given the administration or the government a bit of an off-ramp. The DOJ could still avoid being found in contempt. How exactly?
Yeah, this is a customary component of contempt findings by courts. They give you a chance to what they call purge the contempt, to knock it off the books, to do what the judge wanted you to do in the first place and find a way to make up for it. Now, he's not terribly clear on what that would be. He, in fact, gives the administration some license to recommend their own way to purge this contempt finding, and they could do that over the next few days. But if they don't, and you see here from a Trump administration spokesperson, they don't appear to be ready to change their tactics and change their approach and purge this contempt, and if they don't, the judge has the possible capability to call hearings, swear in witnesses, take depositions from Trump administration officials, and if that doesn't satisfy him, Errol, he can appoint a prosecutor, try to make a case against some of these officials.
Wow. And so, Scott, in our last few moments with you, what happens then if he moves forward with this? And what evidence have you seen that suggests the government is ready to send more flights to El Salvador?
Some real uncharted waters here. This would likely take months to effectuate some type of contempt finding against a different branch of government. That's something that's going to go toward the end of the year, if not into next year. Let's start with that. But there also are court filings being filed today and last night that indicate, Errol, there are more flights being prepped, more potential Alien Enemies Act flights from Texas or Louisiana. Errol, this could all come back before the courts in several new cases. The mountain of paperwork grows taller.
Remarkable. All right, Scott MacFarlane with the latest on this. Scott, thank you very much. Now, let's jump over to Puerto Rico. Power there right now. It's slowly coming back on after what was an island-wide blackout yesterday. As of this morning, officials say more than 40% of customers have had their electricity restored. Puerto Rico's governor said, quote, "It is unacceptable that we have failures of this kind." CBS News national correspondent Manny Bojorges joins us now from the island's capital of San Juan. Manny, good morning to you. We know that the islands face a string of major blackouts in recent years. So I don't want to say people are used to this, but they know what to do when it happens. How are people reacting?
Yeah, they're frustrated that this keeps happening over and over. I don't know if you can hear it, but there are still generators going off in this part of San Juan because power has not been fully restored. At last check, even though crews are making progress, they report that 47% of customers here on the island do have service restored. That means slightly more than half still do not. And we're approaching the hottest part of the day. So even though hotels and big businesses and hospitals have generators going right now, you'd imagine a lot of people are sitting at home right now still without their power restored. And we spoke with people last night by candlelight who are just frustrated that they've not been able to get a better situation here with the power grid. Of course, we know that the grid had issues before Hurricane Maria hit in 2017, but it's been a very slow recovery to get it back up and running in a way that really they can depend on here.
Yeah, Manny, we know that infrastructure has long been a pervasive issue there on the island. We were speaking this morning and you mentioned that it may have been nature or plants or a branch that triggered this blackout. Any other clues as to what caused this time around?
That's right. That's right. As they investigate, they said one of the factors could be vegetation on a transmission line. That's as much as they have said, so far. But the grid has had so many different types of issues, and it's been so hard to get the funding and then the work done to restore it. So again, people are used to hearing some of these causes. It doesn't make them feel any better about it.
And we're just looking at footage of traffic lights being out, people fueling up with gas so they can run their generators. Any indication when power will be fully restored.
Yeah, the last update from officials, they were estimating that it could be 48 hours from now before they have 90% of customers back online.
All right, Manny Bujorquez in Puerto Rico. You and the crew, Manny, stay cool. We appreciate the update.
Thank you.
All right, now how the latest salvo in Harvard's battle with the Department of Homeland Security could hurt international students looking to study here in the U.S. You're in the right place, streaming CBS News 24/7. All right, welcome back. Days of severe thunderstorms are brewing at this moment. You see them right next to me. This storm system's making its way across the central U.S. Let's jump over to one of our favorite experts, CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore. He has a much cooler look at the national forecast. Grant, good morning to you. How do things look?
Good morning, Errol. Look, it's one of those situations where going into the next few days, it's going to resemble your typical severe weather multi-day outbreak. But what's interesting about this is on the back side of it, I mean, we're in the middle of April here, and we're talking about a significant amount of snow falling across the central and northern Rockies. Let's talk about that first. We've got several winter weather or winter storm warnings and winter weather advisories in effect, but the severe threat is going to be a little bit farther east, back into eastern Nebraska and Iowa today, even parts of southern Minnesota. But on the south side of the storm system, windy conditions are going to really create a threat for some fire danger, a critical to extreme risk for fire danger across New Mexico later on this afternoon with gusty winds. And then that severe threat is going to transition to the east up into the Great Lakes, back into the southern plains as we go into Friday. And then Saturday, almost in the same place, just a little bit farther south into Texas, Oklahoma, and Arkansas, that slight risk for severe weather all the way into Sunday, Errol. That severe risk continues across the mid-Mississippi Valley. Back to you for now.
All right, folks should stay close to get your updates. Grant, thank you very much. See you later this hour. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, they're in Paris this morning for talks with European and Ukrainian officials on the war in Ukraine. U.S. officials are expected to discuss the ongoing nuclear talks between Iran and Washington as well. The U.S. is set to hold a second round of negotiations with Tehran in Rome this weekend. Now, those high-stakes talks come as the New York Times reports President Trump blocked a planned Israeli airstrike on Iranian nuclear sites. According to the Times, Israel had planned to launch those strikes as early as next month. However, the president decided not to back that move in order to focus instead on these negotiations with Tehran. We're also watching some other big stories for you. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy is responding to new data showing rising autism rates in the U.S., and he's sparking controversy with his remarks. In the news conference, Kennedy said he was shocked at the rising rate and linked it to environmental factors he also called autism preventable. CBS News medical contributor Dr. Celine Gounder dispelled some of those misconceptions.
To be preventable, you would need to know what causes autism. We know it's multifactorial. Genetics are a big part of that. There probably is an environmental component and other things at play as well. But if you can't say what it is, other than genetics, I mean, we can't really control your genetics. So if we can't say what it is, it's very difficult, if not impossible, to prevent. Well, I do think we need to be addressing some of these environmental questions. So some of the things they're wanting to look at, and in fact, I was here, I think it was last week, talking about how diabetes, type 2 diabetes or gestational diabetes during pregnancy might be a risk factor for autism. Some of the other things we've talked about are exposures to plastics, air pollution, and so on. So I do think that research is important, but to say that there is one toxin that is driving all of this is one, I think, highly unlikely, and I think is really misleading.
Myla. Dr. Gounder there on CBS Mornings earlier. She also highlighted what parents and advocacy groups emphasize. Autism appears on a spectrum and a diagnosis is not reflective of a person's capabilities. Important detail on that. All right, the Department of Homeland Security is now threatening to revoke Harvard's ability to enroll foreign students. This comes just days after the university refused to comply with the Trump administration's demand that it alter its hiring policy and other functions. CBS News Boston reporter Anna Myla has more on this for us.
The Homeland Security Secretary says they will take away Harvard's ability to enroll international students if the university doesn't turn over detailed records on international students' quote, illegal and violent activities by the end of this month. The Department of Homeland Security also announced the cancellation of 2 grants to Harvard, totaling over $2.7 million. The secretary writing in part that Harvard, bending the knee to anti-Semitism driven by its spineless leadership, fuels a cesspool of extremist riots and threatens our national security. Now, this follows a $2 billion federal funding freeze because Harvard rejected a list of demands, including the Trump administration's request to end DEI programs and to limit campus protests. A Harvard University spokesperson says they stand by their previous statement that they will not surrender its independence or relinquish its constitutional rights. Harvard has an enormous endowment fund, but a Wellesley College economics professor says it's likely not enough to cushion the blow of these massive cuts.
Talking about $2 billion once, plus another $500 million a year, essentially forever. That will do a very good job of depleting that endowment pretty quickly. If you're at MGH and something is wrong with you, you are very grateful that Harvard is spending all of that money on research.
President Trump is also targeting Harvard's tax exemption status, a move that would cost the school millions more dollars. Back to you.
All right, thank you for that. Coming up next, Eric and Lyle Menendez's long-awaited resentencing hearing could be delayed today. We'll explain why their chance at freedom may have to wait once again. You're in the right place, streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back. These are the big stories we're tracking for you right now. The Pentagon put another top defense official on leave as it investigates potential leaks. Sources tell CBS News Colin Carroll is the third official put on administrative leave and the second to be physically escorted out of the Pentagon this week. Carroll was the chief of staff to the Deputy Secretary of Defense. A search warrant in the apparent arson attack at Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro's home suggests the suspect may have been politically motivated. Cody Balmer is accused of breaking into the governor's mansion and throwing Molotov cocktails while inside. Court documents suggest Balmer referenced the conflict in Gaza to 911 operators after the attack. And we have this headline for you. The Texas House has approved a Senate bill that would allocate $1 billion to support school choice. That money would go toward vouchers for students who choose to go to an accredited private school. Opponents say most students in Texas would not benefit from the program, and this would take away from public school funding. All right, there are still more votes that need to happen before this becomes law. President Trump spoke with Texas House Republicans to offer his support before that vote. Now to this story. El Salvador's government is doubling down on keeping deportee Kilmar Obrego Garcia out of the United States. Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen traveled to El Salvador and met with its vice president yesterday, but Van Hollen was denied access to the prison where the Maryland man is being held. CBS News immigration and politics reporter Camila Montoya Galvez has been following this and many other stories. Camila, great to see you this morning. What was interesting from Senator Van Hollen is he said the El Salvadorian government told him they cannot release Obrego Garcia because the U.S. government is paying them to detain him and others. Why is that such a significant detail in this fight?
Well, Errol, it is significant because the administration has been arguing that right now the U.S. is powerless to require the Salvadorian government to release Mr. Obrego Garcia from that notorious prison known as Secot and to bring him back to the U.S. Of course, the administration is under a binding court order from a judge to facilitate his return to the U.S., but the administration is taking the legal position that the word facilitate, Errol, simply means allowing him to come back if the Salvadorian government says he can come back to the U.S. and releases him from that notorious, infamous prison. Otherwise, they say the U.S. cannot do anything, but of course the U.S., as you just underscored, is paying El Salvador $6 million to house people like Mr. Obrego Garcia.
Yeah, a difference between what we're hearing publicly and what's being said in court. The administration, as we might expect, is slamming Van Hollen's trip, making it clear it won't allow the man back into the U.S. But can you tell us what new evidence is being provided by this administration and the government about the man's background?
Well, the Trump administration is making several accusations against Mr. Abrego Garcia. The first one is that he is a known gang member. And to make that accusation, they are citing information that they say comes from a credible informant back in 2019 who identified this man as a potential gang member. The lawyers for Mr. Abrego Garcia say that is all based on hearsay, and they deny that. The other new accusation they're making is that there was a domestic violence case filed by his wife, and that is true. We looked at Maryland records, and she did file a protective order against him in 2021, but she told us in a statement that they were able to resolve that issue as a family and that he's still a loving father and husband. So again, they're trying to undermine the public argument for returning him to the U.S., despite the fact that they have admitted in federal court that they made a legal mistake here.
Incredible. Now, I know that separately, but also connected to these stories, you have new information about deportations to Guantanamo Bay in Cuba. What's fresh there?
Well, Errol, you may recall that back in January when President Trump talked about using Guantanamo Bay as a massive detention site for migrants in the country illegally, he said it would house the worst of the worst, including dangerous criminals. But we obtained the internal memo governing operations at that facility, and it actually gives officials broad and wide-ranging discretion to decide who to send to that military base, including the ability to send non-criminal migrant detainees. In fact, the majority of the 42 migrants currently held at the base, we understand, are non-criminal migrants who the administration has classified as low-risk detainees, meaning they have no criminal record or none at all. No serious criminal record, that is, or none at all, I should underscore.
So in summary, non-criminal migrant detainees that are low risk, there is
can
the
be sent to
potential
Gitmo now.
Could be at Guantanamo Bay.
That's right.
Remarkable reporting there. Camilo Montoya-Galvez, we appreciate those updates. Thanks,
Errol.
Now we jump to this. President Trump is authorizing the U.S. military to take control of what you see right next to me, a 700-mile stretch of federal land along the southern border, and turn it into an army base. Now, critics say this is an effort to get around the prohibition on using the military for domestic law enforcement. CBS News correspondent Jason Allen got a first-hand look at what's happening there.
We were at Fort Bliss in El Paso, Texas, when the Army delivered more than 50 armored Stryker fighting vehicles.
He's checking the VC hitch.
Designed for the battlefield, they are a centerpiece of President Trump's plan to seal the southern border.
No weapon systems on this one?
No, there's no weapon system on this one. Like, again, we're just using the capability of the camera right now for scanning and detecting.
Sergeant First Class Carlos Zamora is one of the soldiers from Fort Carson, Colorado, using thermal and infrared cameras on the Stryker, watching for the tiniest movements along the border.
Even like a little mouse.
Up to a little mouse?
Yeah, up to a little mouse, like up to like a mile out.
With the Strykers and soldiers, President Trump is creating a border barrier that is more than just a wall. He has now authorized the military to take control of a 60-foot strip of federal land along the border, stretching from California to New Mexico. Now, migrants would be crossing into a military installation. It would allow soldiers to make apprehensions, a job that, until now, has been reserved for the Border Patrol.
These Strykers can carry as many as 9 people. The ones that are here now have been stationary, but they can go on patrol if that's something Border Patrol needs. When crossings have dropped as much as they have, do you still need that extra observation help?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do, because the terrain is very tricky.
Border Patrol agent Orlando Marrero Rubio showed us how improved access to busy crossing zones helped drastically cut border crossings before the Army arrived. There were about 7,200 crossings during the entire month of March. In 2023, there were some days when more than 10,000 people crossed. On a mountain where foot trails have been worn into the hillside, on this morning, we didn't see a single person trying to cross. Just the sight of the Strykers has turned out to be intimidating for some people. Soldiers told me that they have watched people approach the border wall, see the Strykers perched up there above it, and then turn around and go back in the other direction. Jason Allen, CBS News, Dallas.
Thank you, Jason. All right, Lyle and Eric Menendez are set to return to court this morning in California for a re-sentencing hearing that could bring the brothers closer to freedom. They've been behind bars for more than 30 years for killing their parents way back in 1989. But last night, the Los Angeles County District Attorney's Office asked for today's hearing to be delayed. CBS News correspondent Carter Evans is at the LA courthouse and joins us with more on this. Carter, good morning to you. Can you help us understand why the DA is asking to put today's hearing on hold? What's the reasoning there?
So right now, the parole board is conducting a review of the brothers to determine, what it would be like if they let them back out. Are they going to be a danger to society? What's the situation? And that review is being put together right now. And so the district attorney is basically saying, hey, Judge, we want you to hold off on this until you get that review from the parole board. But, it could go either way here, I think, because one way or the other, the parole board is going to have to weigh in on it. Let's say the resentencing goes forward today, right? And let's say the judge decides to resentence them. Well, then the parole board has to decide if they're eligible for parole, because the resentencing would be life with parole. They're life without parole right now. So it would go right back to the parole board here. So ultimately, it's going to come down to the parole board. Do you wait to find out about the review until after it's done, or do you just go ahead and get this moving and then let the parole board do its thing?
Okay, so we have a new DA in town who is against any additional opportunity for these brothers, but their legal team is making the case that they should have the opportunity for parole. How will they try and make that argument? What will they point to?
So what the new district attorney is going to say, and he's made this argument already, is that the brothers, in order to be allowed to go free, they need to fully accept and take responsibility for what they did. And the DA's interpretation of this and what they're doing right now is he's saying, look, even as recently as that Netflix documentary, you had the brothers saying that, hey, that night, we thought our parents were going to kill us, and so we killed them in self-defense. The DA says that is a lie, and they need to come clean on that before they should be eligible to be back out in society. Now, if you ask the Menendez family, who fully supports their release, by the way, they said, look, they've been model citizens in prison for the last 3 decades, and they've done a lot of good things right now that warrant this release. So that's where they stand, and we'll see what those are basically the arguments you're going to hear in the resentencing hearing.
Yeah, and Carter, some of our audience may only know of these brothers from the Netflix special. They may not have grown up when this trial was huge news. You and I remember that from back in the day. Just summarize for our viewers the original offense and why the brothers say that it's different than how people remember it.
Yeah, so, basically the brothers admitted to killing their parents in court, in trial. But all along the way, they had gone to great efforts to cover up their premeditated effort to kill their parents. And I think the argument in trial from the prosecution was, look, if this was self-defense, if you thought like, oh my gosh, your parents are going to kill you that very night, then why did you weeks ahead of time make these detailed plans to go out and buy a gun and use a fake ID and then talk to your friends about potential alibis and things like that? It just doesn't play right.
All right, Carter Evans following all the latest updates for us. Carter, thank you very much.
Sure.
There we are with that live report in California, but let's now jump to Pennsylvania. CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore has another look at the national forecast. Grant, how does it look?
Lost audio.
Obviously, Grant looks great. We just can't hear him at the moment, but we'll get an update after the break. That's how you know you're watching live television, folks. This is happening in real time. Coming up next for you, we've got the latest on the Holy Week itinerary for Pope Francis, where the pontiff may and may not be appearing. You're in the right place, watching live CBS News 24/7. How do you know when you're working too much when your battery dies? Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore, who moments ago had his own battery die because you're working too hard, Grant. We can hear you now. How's the national forecast?
Errol, I was just trying to play charades with you. It wasn't the battery.
Oh, of course. Okay, well done. Well, you win. It worked.
Well, there you go. What I was trying to say is, look, it's springtime, but instead of spring-like weather, we've got something that rhymes with oh no, but it's snow out there across the mid and northern Rockies. Are you kidding me? It's mid-April, and we've got quite a bit of snow. This is the radar as we speak right now. Let me drop this, and let me pull up our maps here. Let me show you what we've got working across the country, because it's not just snow, but it's also the threat for severe weather as well. There you've got some snow falling across the mid and northern Rockies. You've got some rain moving across the mid-Mississippi Valley. Watch what accumulates across portions of the higher elevations of the Rockies over the next couple of days. We're talking 6 to 7 inches of snow in portions of eastern Colorado. But as you head up into the mid and northern Rockies, the highest of the elevations could pick up 10 to 12 inches of snow. The eastern side of the storm system, severe threat develops as we go throughout the day today. An enhanced threat for severe weather back towards Omaha, there in western Iowa into eastern Nebraska. Damaging winds, tornadoes, all a possibility, but the greatest risk from damage actually from hail today. An enhanced threat for large hail, 3 inches in diameter or even larger than that later today. And then the southern side of the storm system producing gusty conditions on the dry conditions that are in place across New Mexico into portions of southern Colorado and back into southwestern Kansas and Oklahoma. So an enhanced to extreme risk for fire danger today. The severe threat will advance to the east up into the Great Lakes states tomorrow. In fact, that threat for severe weather will continue as we go into the Easter weekend. Back into the southern plains and portions of the lower Mississippi Valley as we go into Saturday and Sunday. That threat for damaging winds will continue. The forecast radar shows you that development as the storm system number 1, that will dissipate, and then storm system number 2 will reignite that severe threat as we go into the weekend and next week. Across the country today, though, the eastern half of the United States looks very nice. Got dry conditions there from Florida all the way into the Northeast. There's that severe threat across the northern part of the plains into the western high plains. Hot and windy conditions with that fire danger across the southern plains and desert southwest. And then again, there you've got that snow falling across the Great Basin up into the northern tier states. But as we go into the weekend, all of that weather will slowly move to the east. The northeast will see a small chance of rain as we go through Saturday night into early on Easter Sunday. Errol, hopefully you can hear me now, and we'll send things back to you.
Rhymes with snow? Oh, no? Okay, Grant, we'll see if we can come up with something better than that before the end of the show. We'll see you in a few minutes. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that. Cardinals presided over Holy Thursday Mass in St. Peter's Basilica at the Vatican this morning. They filled in for Pope Francis, who continues to recover from his bout of double pneumonia. Speaking yesterday, the 88-year-old pontiff thanked members of the medical team who treated him during his 5-week stay in hospital. Now, at this moment, it's unclear if the Pope will be able to officiate Mass for other holy services this week, including Good Friday and Easter Sunday. We'll, of course, keep you posted on all of that. All right, still to come for you, a distant exoplanet is discovered to have the potential to support life. The truth is out there, and you're in the right place. Streaming CBS News 24/7. Welcome back. Comments on autism from Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. come as the nation observes Autism Acceptance Month. Every April, it's a chance to showcase the talents within the autism community and raise awareness. CBS News Philadelphia reporter Eva Anderson introduces us now to 2 South Philly adults with autism finding meaning and purpose in their jobs.
When popcorn looks this tasty, it would be a crime if it didn't get distributed to the people who want it most.
These will be ready to ship out.
Thankfully, that task is in the careful hands of Liam Tequila. And as an employee at Popcorn for the People, he can't wipe the smile off his face, expressing gratitude for each customer whose order he fulfills.
Thank you, folks.
The 30-year-old plays a critical role at this popcorn facility that's also a nonprofit employing adults with disabilities.
12 years before I found this job, I finally found one I liked.
And one he could keep, which he says has been a challenge living with autism and PTSD.
A lot of places aren't too understanding, but as you can see, we can do stuff too, so, you know, you don't feel so alone here.
Loneliness is something Tequila says he's dealt with quite a bit. And during the quiet moments on his commute into work, Tequila sometimes reflects on how it's affected his ability to live in this world.
Oh, it's terrible. Don't ever get PTSD.
Before his current job, Tequila said he was unemployed for half a year, joining the 77% of adults with disabilities who are unemployed, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
I lost a job due to a PTSD trigger. I'm glad I'm at a better place. So I try to look at the good.
Tequila says there's a lot of good now that he's employed.
I was just in therapy last night, and we were talking that, and I mentioned that's one of the blessings I count.
He's got a place to go to each day where he feels like he belongs, and he says it's made him feel more confident.
It might be a little different, but I can run this machine like anybody else.
His coworkers like Marcus Johnson feel the same.
I believe in myself because I have faith in me and everybody. And the more we work together as a team, we be unstoppable and stronger together.
What does it feel like when you do have to go home?
I get sad.
The goodbyes aren't easy.
I'm not gonna lie. Have a good night.
But each day ends with peace, knowing that he's found his place.
We'll see you in the morning.
Yes. Eva Anderson, CBS News, Philadelphia.
This has to be the coolest story of the day. Scientists say they found the strongest evidence yet that there very well could be life in outer space. The planet, known as K2-18b, is 2.5 times the size of Earth. Now, a group of researchers in England studying the planet say they've detected signs of the types of molecules that are here on Earth and produced by living organisms. But they stress, as sexy as the headline is, more data is needed. And listen to this, Star Wars fans, new analysis of a different exoplanet 120 light years away has some folks comparing it to George Lucas's fictional world of Tatooine. Remember that? The planet's odd orbit around two brown dwarfs, which are failed stars, is similar to the twin sunsets on the planet Luke Skywalker called home. Again, they say much more research is needed. I can tell how these scientists keep getting funding because they tie it to cool things like sci-fi to say, let's keep studying it. Let's bring in CBS News Philadelphia meteorologist Grant Gilmore with a look at this planet and what's happening in our forecast. Grant?
And look, and when it comes to the weather, this is hard enough. So look, maybe the beginning of some things. Of course, they say more research is needed, and certainly something that we'll be watching for, right? Here's what we're watching for across the country today. You've got hot and windy conditions across the southern plains back into the desert southwest. Watching for extreme fire danger today, where temperatures across a lot of West Texas are going to be in the mid-90s this afternoon. To the north, you've got severe weather expected later this evening across the northern plains up into the upper Midwestern states. And then on the backside of this storm system, snow falling across the central and northern Rockies. Meanwhile, the eastern half of the United States finally breaking from the spring chill that we've been in recently. Beautiful conditions all up along the eastern seaboard. Places across Florida looking at high temperatures today in the low and mid 80s. Errol, back to you.
Always good down in Florida. Thanks, Grant. Great to see you today. Appreciate all your hits. And thank you all for spending the hour with us. You can join me at 7 a.m. Eastern for the CBS Morning News. After the break, Mugo Odigwe has all the breaking news from coast to coast. This is CBS News 24/7.